Good morning. Welcome here in the sanctuary. Welcome online to the Unitarian Universalist Church of St. Petersburg. This is our Sunday service. We are currently on lands stolen from the Tocobaga and Seminole Native Americans. Muslims are still fasting this week for Ramadan. Pagans are about to celebrate Ostara. This week is St. Patrick's Day, and yesterday, mathematicians observed Pi Day. Mathematicians and those who love them. March 14th, 314. Pi Day. I heard a what? My name is Ben. My pronouns are he and they. I am very excited for this morning's worship service. It's called Inherent Mirth and Dignity. We will have music by Todd, who did that amazing performance of Yes, We Have No Bananas. And Michael. We're going to have a view from the pew by Cal Fox. Today's guest speaker is a very good friend of mine. Now, who here has heard of the Unitarian Universalist Hysterical Society? Okay, many fans here. Who knows how many members are in that group? Anyone? Thousands? 300,000 members of this Facebook group that you'll be hearing about later. Just by comparison, how many members do you think we have in the entire Unitarian Universalist Association? It's about half that. The Hysterical Society has way more members than we do. From Saskatchewan, Canada, the Unitarian Universalist Church of St. Petersburg is proud to welcome UU Hysterical Society founder Liz James.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Liz. Pronouns are she, her. If you want a church where you are welcome with your doubts as well as your convictions, I have good news. You may have found your church home. Lighthearted energy of children is welcome here. Lighthearted energy of any age, really. And we encourage our families to bring children and grandchildren back on a regular basis. In the back, there's a basket with fidget toys for children or anybody who gets fidgety.
Thank you, Liz. We have one announcement today, and Rebecca's going to give it. Oh, is it hot?
I think my mic is on, and this is my thermometer. Check it out. Woo. Can you see? We have now, as of this morning, we have recorded 55 pledges totaling $131,000. That is 43% of our goal. So if you haven't pledged yet, there's still time. And there's a handout on the pews, but if that doesn't make sense to you, QR codes and links and stuff, just see me at coffee hour and I'll help you out. One other thing. This Thursday, the board meets, and you know what they do? They govern our church. They make a plan for our finances for the coming year. And so that's why they ask us to pledge. Of course, we pledge because we love our church, but they need to know what the numbers are going to be next year so we know if we can still afford to have a minister, and you know. So anyway, let's see. So see me to get your name on the thermometer, and remember, it takes all of us.
It takes all of us. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Annual Giving Team.
And please read the rest of your announcements in the order of service or the monthly newsletter and on the TV in Gilmore during coffee hour.
Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we are a people of diverse beliefs, but we do share a common faith that every being is worthy of love, that what we do in this world matters, and that we're connected. We're connected to one another, we're connected to the earth. So whoever you are and wherever you are in your journey, you are welcome here.
Allow me to give a special welcome to anybody who is new. If you're new to UU St. Pete, or even relatively new, would you like to give a wave? And if you like, you can briefly introduce yourself. Reverend Brennan can bring the microphone to you if you'd like to introduce yourself so that those on YouTube can hear you as well. You're under no obligation to say anything, but if you're willing, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, that was brief.
UUs are famous for brief. I'll also remind you to put your cell phones into worship mode or mute. Regarding masks, we encourage you to wear one as you're comfortable. And now's time to turn and greet one another. Say hello to someone who you aren't close friends with today and share what brings you joy.
Liz has a time for all ages today, so our kiddos will stay with us for another few minutes. Please rise as you're willing and able for our first hymn. We're using alternate lyrics with apologies to the great Holly Near. Let's sing number 170 in the gray hymnal. We are a gentle, angry people.
Only today we're a doubting people. The new lyrics, right, in your program. We are a gentle, doubting people, and we are doubting all our lives. We like discussions vaguely ending, but a firm answer, well, answers give us hives. We will consider every viewpoint, and we will never let things rest. We won't reach a firm conclusion. We'd rather argue with great zest.
Very nice. You may be seated. Liz has brought us some opening words this morning, and they're from Dan Savage.
Right before the opening words, I have a very short little story. Traveling around the US and Canada talking about humor, I keep having this same conversation over and over again. Someone will sidle up to me in coffee hour and they'll say, "It's important to laugh." And I will say, "Yeah, I mean, obviously I think so too." And then they will say, "Even with all the, it's important to laugh." And I will think, well, especially with all the, and it's always a different all the, but you can count on that there's going to be an all the. And what strikes me about this conversation is it is always had in a tone of voice I imagine is reserved for the buying and selling of drugs. We're earnest people, and it can feel heretical to take time for laughter at a time when so much that is serious is going on. And especially as an outsider celebrating laughter with you this morning, I don't want you to think it's because I don't take this stuff seriously. It's because I take this stuff seriously that I think it's important to take a break for joy and community. So with that in mind, we have opening words from Dan Savage.
During the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, we buried our friends in the morning, we protested in the afternoon, and we danced all night. The dance kept us in the fight because it was the dance we were fighting for. It didn't look like we were going to win, and then we did. It doesn't feel like we're going to win now, but we could. Keep fighting, keep dancing.
And I would add to that, keep laughing.
Let's light our chalice. Is Ruby still available to light our chalice? Thank you, Ruby. And when she does, I invite you to say our covenant out loud. That is in your programs and online. You hopefully also have access to that program. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to seek
together in
peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And Ruby, you could stay up front because we're having a time for all ages. You could just go in front of that small table there. Do we have other children who want to come forth for a time for all ages? They went back there. We have an audience of one.
Ruby, this is Liz. Liz, this is Ruby.
Hello, Ruby. We're going to do a great story. If there's any grown-ups who want to see the puppets are cool for all ages. You might want to come forward. There's room in the front. Our story this morning is After the Fall by Dan Santat. My name is Humpty Dumpty. This was my favorite spot high up on the wall, which, when you think about it, is a weird place for an egg to be. But I loved being up in the sky with the birds. Then one day, I fell. Folks called it the Great Fall, but it was just an accident. But it changed my life. All the king's horses and all the king's men did manage to put me back together. Most of me. There were some parts that couldn't be healed with bandages and glue. Ruby, are you willing to tell them where Humpty Dumpty is sleeping? Is he up on his bunk bed?
He's here.
He's there, on the ground, okay?
On the ground.
Yeah, he's a little scared. After that day, I became afraid of heights. It kept me from enjoying some of my favorite things. And for people at the back or anyone who can't read yet, the cereals up at the top of the ladder at the grocery store are brightly colored with names like Bowl of Cookies and Choco Duck and Rainbow Bites. And along the bottom we have grown-up food, chicken feed, salad clown, twigs and berries. Those don't look like nearly as fun as cereals, do they? I would walk past that wall every day, and I would think about climbing that ladder again. I missed being up in the sky with the birds. But I knew accidents can happen. I eventually settled for watching the birds from the ground. It was not the same, but it was better than nothing. And then one day, an idea flew by. That's for you. Making paper planes was harder than I thought. It was easy to get cuts and scratches, but day after day I kept trying and trying until I got it just right. My plane was perfect. It flew like nothing could stop it. It wasn't the same as being up in the sky with the birds, but it was pretty close. And then one day, something terrible happened. Where did the plane land, Ruby?
Up there.
On the wall. I almost walked away again, but then I thought about all the time that I'd spent working on my plane and all the other things I missed, and I decided I was going to climb that wall. The higher I got, the more afraid I felt. I didn't want to admit it, but I was terrified. I didn't look up. I didn't look down. I just kept climbing, one step at a time, until I was no longer afraid. And maybe now you won't think of me, oh, what's happening? As the egg that's famous for falling. Maybe you'll remember me as an egg who got back up and discovered he could fly. Ruby, what came out of the egg? Can you tell the people?
A bird.
And that's the end.
Thank you, Ruby.
Let's sing Ruby out together. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then.
This is a time in our worship for joys, sorrows, and concerns. And I haven't forgot you, YouTube Live folks. You're not here in the room, but your presence is felt. So at this point, please type your joys, your sorrows, your concerns into the YouTube Live text chat. Robin has already brought me a card forward, and if any of you have them, you can bring them to me at this point. I didn't get anyone to do the stones in the water. Albie, could I trouble you to? Okay, thank you so much, Albie. First, we have a stone of joy and gratitude for the president of our Unitarian Universalist Association here in the United States, Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt. And we'll have another stone for our UUA staff and leaders, especially the UUA Southern region. And then a final stone in appreciation for the Canadian Unitarian Council. We have a stone of concern. It's from my mother, who's here, Johanna Zeman, and it's for her elder sister and my aunt, Alinda. My aunt Alinda is in hospice care in her Massachusetts home. We have a stone of concern from Todd Wellman, our musician, one of our musicians today, and that's for Jody, whom many of us know, who's an opera singer who's volunteered for our church services many times. Jody's father unexpectedly passed away, and now her brother is in the hospital. Danny Bly's mom wrote to them this morning saying, quote, Helen's nephew Roberto got his deployment orders. I don't know the details yet. Would you ask Reverend Ben to pray for him, send hope and love to the universe for all of our military. We have a stone of concern for Pat Fling, who is in the hospital recovering from pneumonia this morning. Yeah. And a stone from Robin C. It's a stone of both joy and sorrow for making new friends and ending a friendship. And you don't have any cards over there, I don't think? So let's place one more stone, Albie, and that's for the joys and concerns and sorrows that remain in our hearts, because sometimes they're too tender to be spoken out loud. The mystery, of course, is that we are connected, even when we feel apart. So let us rejoice in the beloved community that makes of the many one, and let's take about a minute of silence together.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hands, bringing life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Good morning, everyone. So if you've ever watched public television during one of their big weeks, as I've come to call them, where they offer you wonderful CDs of famous entertainers in exchange for a small annual donation, then you've probably figured out that this is UUSP's Beg Month. We clearly can't offer CDs of famous people in exchange for your pledge, but we do offer something that I regard as far more valuable: fellowship and spiritual food. We first came to this place shortly after we moved here from Chicago because of an article that we saw in the paper about a darling church on a lake. As is the case still today, we were greeted at the door by the friendliest, most welcoming people imaginable. And we didn't know what to expect after all that, but our hearts were open and hearts were open to what might come next. When I heard the covenant being read at the beginning of the service, I knew I was in a place where I could feel safe being a seeker, kind of like what the music was this morning. No one was going to jam any theology down my gullet or shame me for not believing as they did. Here I might find other seekers who could expose me to spiritual ideas I hadn't thought of ever, or maybe in a long time, or maybe in some new context. There are so many wisdom traditions in this ever-expanding universe. Why should I limit myself to one when I can find new favorite ideas and concepts and expressions of what's in my heart? It didn't take long for me to join this congregation and to pledge my financial support, because I have long believed that fellowship and spiritual nourishment are as essential to my health as regular medical checkups and a healthy diet. Sunday is my day for a checkup from the neck up. A dedicated time for me to open my mind and heart to what's really going on in my spiritual life, to live my life as the best me I can be. Here in this place, I have found people who are willing to be helpful and are vulnerable and open to new ideas and ways of looking at things. That makes fellowship really productive. I also found people who are passionate about the things they believe in and act out that passion with dedication. That's inspiring to me. And although I may not have the same passions as they do, I find that following them educates me and forces me to open my heart and mind to those ideas and beliefs. Maybe this is a bit of a stretch, but I like to think about this whole pledge thing as a kind of spiritual preventive medicine. Yes, I could go to a spiritual clinic when I have some nagging resentment or some rant about how the world is treating me. I could even talk to a shrink or a minister and get some emergency surgery on my thinking or emotions. But it's much less painful to consult Rev Ben and my fellowship before things even get that far. My annual pledge each year isn't the largest our congregation gets, nor does it reflect the actual value I get from my membership in the congregation. But I'm more than happy to put my commitment to UU St. Pete into my spiritual wellness in my annual budget. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Cal. We now invite you to share a responsive reading. Your words are printed in your order of service, but ours are not, so I will cue you by doing this. And your first one comes after my brief words. These words are from the Soul Matters team, and Liz brought them to us. It's easy to get tricked, taken for a ride, convinced that joy is a possession. Be opened just by us.
As if it's a holiday special delivery, waiting for us to unwrap it and keep it forever.
And who can blame us with pain being so prevalent?
Sadness ceases to stay. Why can't joy? But maybe it's elusive for a reason. Maybe it's slippery in order to help us understand that it was put here to fly.
Or better yet, to be flung, to be passed, not possessed, to be spread between you and me, between the ones
who received its gift and the ones who have been looking for its treasure for a very long time. Maybe joy is a beautiful and elegant contagion, a power over which we have more control than we think.
If only we share it.
If only we notice that joy is not ours to keep, but ours to give.
Maybe joy opens us as much as we open to it.
Maybe that's the way light leaks into our world.
Have any of you been to Myakka State Park? Yeah, I drove out there yesterday with some friends, and oh my goodness, on the way out, it's a sea of developments, and they're all beige houses that look the same. This song might spark a little chuckle in you. If you know it, you may sing. Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one, there's a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And the people in the houses all went to the university where they were put in boxes, and they all came out the same. And there's doctors and lawyers and business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And they all play on the golf course and drink their martini dry, and they all have pretty children, and the children go to school, and the children go to summer camp, and then to the university where they're all put in boxes, and they all come out the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family, and the boxes are made of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Just as I was beginning seminary, my congregation moved into a new building. I was on the board at the time, and I was a busybody with my nose in everything, so I was involved somehow in renovating the space to make it suitable for Unitarian Universalists. First and foremost, that meant removing the giant wooden cross from the front of the room. Now, if you're new, I need to clarify, UUs do not have a problem with crosses. We're not vampires. There are plenty of people who are both UU and Christian, but there's also humanist UUs and agnostic UUs and Buddhists and pagans, just to name a few. So this giant cross at the front of the room would have been lifting up just one perspective. It was a bit more Jesus than we were looking for on a weekly basis. So the theology of it was clear, but in practical terms, it turns out wood is quite heavy. The phrase cross to bear is not just a pretty metaphor. Getting that thing off the wall was a feat of engineering and a near-death experience, and now what? This ginormous cross was not going to fit into the back of my minivan. It would need to be cut up into pieces. And you couldn't use the power saw in the sanctuary because sawdust flies everywhere, and there was an informal rule about no more power saws in the sanctuary. Liz. And it was on the verge of becoming a formal rule. So it was this line of thinking that led me to a conversation with my friend Anne, who is a woman of great maturity and perspective. This is a sensitive time for your neighbors, Anne explained. With the loss of the old church that shrank down until they couldn't afford their building, your new neighbors will be grieving. But there's also great potential for new connection, for inviting people in. And Liz, this community's introduction to Unitarian Universalism cannot be you taking a saw to a cross on the front lawn of the church. So I'm not sure how the cross was removed in the end. For some reason, they didn't involve me any further, but it got done. So here's the thing. It had hung there for many years, beside the huge vaulted window through which light streamed down. And it's true what they say. Light really does transform everything it touches, particularly on a timescale of years. And so, sure enough, the paint around the cross had grown distinctly lighter, but the paint behind the cross had not so much. And so now, beside the pulpit, we had a clearly stenciled outline. This could have been solved by repainting, of course. But in order to do that, we would have had to agree on paint colors. And the decorating committee pointed out that colors couldn't be chosen until the fabric that would replace, for the new chairs that would replace the pews had been chosen. And the worship committee felt we couldn't remove the pews until we talked about how we embody our identity and our relationship to authority in the structure of our worship space. You get where this is going. For many months, we did not worship beside a giant cross. Instead, we worshiped beside a very conspicuous shadow that was cast by its absence. A giant metaphorical "Jesus was here" symbol stenciled above our heads. It was there in more than one way, actually. It was on the literal wall, of course, but it's also in the conspicuous role that the Protestant tradition we come from plays in everything we do. It's in the tunes of the songs we sing, the fact that we meet on Sunday mornings, often in a building owned explicitly for that purpose. We've expanded our theology, but the ways we embody that theology have not changed very much in centuries. To me, the shadow of the cross on the wall on Sunday morning was a physical manifestation of a structure that was frozen in time. It said, we've decided to do things differently, but we're not quite doing that because the details are still stuck in committee. So around the time of this shadow of the cross business, I was feeling personally stuck in committee myself. I was so in love with Unitarian Universalism and its values, and I was expressing that love by going to seminary, where they put me in one of those boxes we sang about. We talked there about the shadow of the cross stuff. We wouldn't have used that language, but we talked about how social change was threatening traditional institutions, like legacy media and academia, and yes, church, and how we might expand our structures to adapt to those changes. But we had those conversations in a seminary, mirroring the old ways of doing things with every detail of our structure. The people leading us in those conversations were ministers and professors, trained and experienced with the old paradigms, not the new ones, which made it really hard to think outside of that box. The details kept getting stuck in committee. So I sucked at all of this. Even when I am not critiquing the premise of school, I am a terrible student. Forcing my brain to study has always felt like trying to wrestle an active toddler into a car seat. I had long since received an ADHD diagnosis, which is the medical term for the toddler car seat situation, and I had received medication and behavioral suggestions and all the messages that go with all of that. At the time, I saw myself as disordered and the wrong shape for academia. But I loved UUism, and I wanted to serve it. And this was how you did it. So I was determined to squeeze into the box that was given to me. Some days. On my better behaved days, anyways. On my less disciplined days, I would skip the books we were supposed to be reading, and I would do what I love to do, which is laugh. And I remember one day, I'm procrastinating on my homework watching these comedians on YouTube, and I think, wait a second. They're talking about the exact same ideas as the people in the books I'm supposed to be reading. Big topics, often tricky ones. Stand-up comedians, they tackle everything: religion, money, race, ethics. But they do it in a way that's funny and accessible and easy to pay attention to. This is the beginning of a doorway in me. Maybe the fact that I had trouble paying attention to academia wasn't just the flaw that would make me a crappy minister, although I firmly believe I would have been a crappy minister. Maybe those traits, though, would allow me to create conversations and community in different shapes that are more accessible to people like me. And the farther I moved from the powerless position of a grade school child, the more assertive that line of thinking became. I would sit in my school lectures and the usual messages would run through my mind. The problem is I need to be better at paying attention. But now, there was this little voice that argued back, that argued, how come it's always that I have to work harder to pay attention? I have been working as hard as I can to pay attention for years. How come my professor never has to work any harder at being a little easier to pay attention to, huh? When it wasn't dry, the stuff I was learning was also, it was not what I had expected. I'd always had these stories in my head, like that of Michael Servetus, the Unitarian martyr, chased and persecuted and ultimately burned at the stake for his brave act of speaking the truth to John Calvin. So it turns out, if you read Servetus' writings in his own words, he is smart and articulate. He's also obnoxious. He doesn't just tell his truth, he stalks John Calvin. He writes letters arguing every little point. He distributes books. At one point, Calvin has a warrant out for Servetus' arrest, and Servetus goes to one of Calvin's lectures, sits in the front row, and stares him down. Servetus was always there, like the worst kind of internet troll, but in real life. And he didn't deserve what happened to him. Nobody deserves that. But after reading his actual words, dripping with arrogance and condescension, there was like this part of me that sympathized with Calvin's urge to get rid of him. I mean, Servetus, I know that guy. I have chaired meetings containing that guy. Sometimes I have been that guy in the meeting. He is the best of us in some ways, and the worst of us in others. Or Emerson and Thoreau, that was another one. I had always admired the transcendentalists, how they forged these intentional, beautiful lives full of integrity. Learning a bit more about it, Thoreau could retreat to the woods to suck the marrow out of life because he was living on land Emerson gave him to use for free. Where'd the land come from, Thoreau? And the story about how you are making the bold choice to live a simple life off the land in the woods, I think we could say that Thoreau didn't invent that way of living. In fact, before Thoreau's people arrived, simple off the land was the only way anyone ever lived in those woods. There was this whole system supporting Thoreau. He had no kids to take care of. He had his free land. We're reasonably sure that Emerson's wife was doing his laundry. Louisa May Alcott, meanwhile, is living a few miles away, making all the same theological points about simplicity and virtue in what would become her best-selling novel, Little Women. But she wrote in a way that was funny and accessible. While her dad sat in the study talking philosophy with Thoreau and Emerson, he did not work for much of Louisa's life because he was too academic. Louisa got to work writing. In a world not built for women to have a voice, she found a way to have one. In a world not built for women to earn, she found a way to feed her family with that voice, and she did all of that while she was doing her own laundry. So I wasn't the only one who was thinking along these lines. We lovers of laughter found each other, and we bonded, and we used our newfound knowledge to play very historically specific pranks on one another. So one time, some of our friends who ran a UU housing cooperative in Boston posted online that they were accepting applications for new roommates. A few of us applied as various famous Unitarians and Universalists. We applied as Emerson, listing Thoreau under pets. We applied as Michael Servetus. Under food allergies, we listed barbecue. I'm not endorsing it, I'm just telling you what happened. We applied as the people we thought were missing from our mainstream history, too. Reverend Olympia Brown, the first woman in the US to be ordained. Dorothy Dix, whose tireless lobbying transformed conditions for institutionalized people in the US, Canada, and several other countries. These women's names are not our best-known heroes, but when you line their lives up against Thoreau in the woods or Servetus writing his letters, you cannot deny that their stories deserve at least as much acknowledgement. The housing co-op wrote back and invited us for an interview, which was going to be tricky because we were dead. The housing co-op also cautioned us in their letter that some housemates may not have experience in living with the dead and may require education on matters of corporeal privilege. All of this was followed by a week of messaging and coordinating and giggling and pranking that left me feeling warm and connected. Connected with my peers and with my UU heritage, gently poking fun at things I thought could be knocked down a peg or two, lifting up stories that aren't always told. I was connected with my values as we coordinated to make sure the prank stayed joyful for everyone and never got mean. Above all, I felt a part of Unitarian Universalism. We understand the shared jokes because they arise out of shared culture and values. I mean, corporeal privilege? How you is that joke? This was a space that had room for me, where I didn't have to change shape to fit into a prescribed shadow. And I didn't want it to end. And so on a whim, I created a Facebook group, and I named it the UU Hysterical Society. This was a play on the UU Historical Society, who have changed their name like twice, so nobody ever gets my joke anymore. People usually just point out that the word hysterical has a troublesome history, used as a weapon to discredit and sometimes harm women. And they're right. Throughout history, the symptoms of hysteria have been varied. Sometimes it was a woman who was struggling with what we would now call a mental illness or a disability. Sometimes it was a physical condition like epilepsy, or a life choice like deciding not to get married. Hysteria was a catch-all word for any woman who was being inconvenient and needed to be treated. A hysterical woman is a woman who is the wrong shape. And I, who was struggling so hard to fit into the shadow of the cross, I loved my UU Hysterical Society. It was an expression of my values. It was a space that fit me. It was a break from the ministerial formation process at a time when that process was starting to break me. For years, I didn't think of it as anything more than Liz's personal refuge. By the time I figured out something was actually going on, we had about 20,000 members. Someone posted that she nearly drove her car off the road after spotting a UU church. She said she thought we were a joke religion made up for the purposes of the UU Hysterical Society, and that seeing a real UU church was like spotting a unicorn. She almost drove her car off the road yelling, "They're real! They're real!" And I thought, wow, we could be telling 20,000 people about what Unitarian Universalism is. And then I thought, crap, I'm not the right person to represent UUism on that kind of scale. I didn't finish the assigned readings. Fortunately, I didn't have to be the right person for that job. A religious educator named Kathy Smith joined the team at about that time, and we were able to fill in the gaps together. We stewarded the group as it continued to grow, and I toyed with the idea that maybe we should become something more. Maybe a legal entity that could apply for grants to fund some of this work Kathy was putting in, or even collect donations from group members. Even thinking along those lines, though, felt presumptive. Like, who did I think we were? This was not a rhetorical question. I had no idea who we were or what we were doing. And then, in November of 2019, something happened that changed my perspective on the group forever. My friend, Reverend Mabutsa Ndadijimana, approached me for help raising money to settle a group of refugees. And in November of 2019, the Hysterical Society held its first charity fundraiser. It was holiday themed. Christmas goes with refugees because of the Christmas story. We sold funny PDFs, like labels for wine that said, "Hey, this was water a minute ago." We sold tags, gift tags that said, "It's the thought that counts, and I way overthought this." We sold flasks that said, "For when thoughts and prayers are not enough," and "This is my spiritual practice," which is a pun in two ways. And we raised more than $16,000. And on one of my trips, arms full of flasks and weird paraphernalia, the post office guy says, "Okay, I will bite. What is a hysterical society?" And I didn't respond how I usually do when asked what I do for a living. Normally, I would have mumbled, "I run a Facebook group that makes fun of my religion." This is not a very accurate answer, but it does usually end the conversation. Instead, I lifted my head up and I grinned, and I answered with confidence and said we were a group that was about joy and community and refugees. We had started gathering around laughter, which is a good in and of itself. It's like a soup kitchen for the soul. But we were slowly turning into more than that. We were still about laughter and community, and also about bringing dignity to people who deserved a new chance to build a life. The Canadian not-for-profit Mirth and Dignity, Inherent Mirth and Dignity, was incorporated the following month, including founding Vice President Reverend Ben Atherton-Zeman, who's been supporting us since the beginning. To this day, 100% of the profit from our merchandise, available today by donation, goes to the charity that Mabutsa founded. But most of what we do is support for forms of UUism that are not supported by traditional institutions. We started with the Hysterical Society, which we still support, but also a board game ministry, and then a comedy podcast, most recently online soulful singing. I could go on, but this is not an infomercial, and you don't need this much detail. Unless you share our vision of UUism beyond traditional structures, in which case, come talk to me about becoming one of the people who supports us with a $5 a month pledge. Okay, now I am done. For now, what I actually want to draw your attention to is the overarching arc of the story, that feeling of not quite fitting, which is, I find, a feeling that a lot of UUs can empathize with. Most of us became UU because we didn't fit into the communities we were born into. We figured out how to become diverse theologically, and I believe that we are also right now in a process of creating structural diversity, a bunch of different interconnected ways to be UU. For now, we have together inherited the shadow of a cross, a set of institutions and practices that define real religion that don't always work for modern communities. I've heard from people who feel like they're tired, they're trying to do too much, it's become too expensive, or they're focused on the wrong things. In our churches and in larger society, we are working ourselves into exhaustion, and our current structures are not doing the trick. What if we're not cracking because we're breaking, but because we are turning into something different? What if we lean into changing shape, into a version of Unitarian Universalism that contains not only churches, but also other types of communities in a symbiotic relationship? I have no idea where that will lead, any more than I have any idea where that prank in 2015 was going to lead. But I do know that the first step is to give ourselves permission to be who we are, not who we think we are supposed to be, or who we have always been. What would we do differently if we saw ourselves as hatching? As the Leonard Cohen lyric tells us so beautifully, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There are cracks in everything. That's how the light gets in. Which I think is true. But it's also not the whole picture. The cracks are how the light gets in, sure. Sometimes, though, the cracks are how the light gets out. The cracks are where the hatching starts.
We eat fruit from trees planted long before we were born. May we plant seeds that bear fruit long after we're gone. Here in the sanctuary, the offering will now be given and received. Your gifts, which are given in love, are received with great joy. Thank you. Please rise as you're willing and able for our closing hymn. It's number 118, This Little Light of Mine.
You may not even need your hymnal. I can feed you the lyrics. Here we go. This little light of mine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up a world, building up a world. I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. One more time, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Nice.
You may be seated. You may be seated.
Our closing words are by UU minister and poet and UU Historical Society moderator, Reverend Lynn Unger. There isn't a right answer, there just isn't. The game show where the bells ring and the points go up and the confetti falls because you got the answer is a lie.
The preacher who would assure you of how to attain salvation is making it all up.
The doctor who knows just how to fix what ails you will be sure of something else tomorrow.
Every choice will wound someone, heal someone, build a wall, and open a conversation. Things will always happen that you can't foresee.
But you have to choose. It's all we have, that little rudder that we employ in the midst of all the eddies and the rapids, the current that pulls us inexorably towards the sea.
The fact that you are swept along by the river is no excuse.
Watch where you are going.
Lean in toward what you love.
And
When in doubt, tell the truth. I'm going to do the chalice extinguishing now, and then we'll do the postlude. I'm calling an audible. Thank you so much for Jerry and Sabina for being willing to extinguish our chalice. So if you'll join us in our chalice extinguishing words, they're in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of courage. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world. You may remain seated for the postlude. Our worship is over, but our service begins. Please join us for coffee hour in Gilmore Hall, and Liz will be there at her merchandise table and be happy to talk with you. We hope this time together will help you through your week. Will help you remember you are not alone. Blessings, friends.